If you listen to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Admiral Mike Mullen, he says the single biggest threat to our country is not terrorism, but it is the threat that is posed by our nation's balance sheet and our debt and deficit. Only in Washington can a gang be considered a good thing. But Saxby Chambliss and I and 4 other senators, 2 other Democrats, 2 other Republicans, have become the so-called Gang of 6. And what we have been working on is a bipartisan effort to try to lay out a serious plan to reduce by more than $4 trillion that $14 trillion debt we face. One of the ways that we are trying to do that is looking at what a report that came out in December called the Simpson-Bowles Report, the President's Deficit Commission, that had as a basis things that said that you could actually lower tax rates in this country and raise more revenues if you're willing to take on tax expenditures. Everybody nods their head. They say, that's great, Warner, let's do that. Until you realize what tax expenditures are. Tax expenditures are things like the mortgage deduction, the charitable deduction, the ability to deduct health care, and a host of other things that have been built in the tax code. Now, before Bill Bartell writes that Warner's getting rid of the mortgage deduction, we're not talking about that, but we are talking about how you can cut some of these back in a way that you can lower rates and actually still generate revenues in a fair way. We collect $1 trillion in income taxes each year. We spend $1.1 trillion in income tax exemptions. Because whether the government writes a program a check or whether the government writes into the tax code a tax code exemption, those are both spending by just different names. One of the questions that was raised earlier was, are you going to take on both personal income tax and corporate rates? The answer is yes. American corporate tax rates are too high. Let me acknowledge that on the front end. If we're going to be competitive with the rest of the world, we've got to bring our business tax rates down. But let me also add, as I mentioned to the group in the other room over there, any Fortune 200 company that's paying 35% corporate tax needs to fire their CFO. Because the effective tax rate of many large companies is really in their teens. Some of us read about GE. GE's a world-class company. But there is something a little awry with our tax code when it made $40 billion and paid 0 taxes. So if we look at corporate taxes as a percentage of our overall revenues, it has been on a declining rate. I believe we need to lower the rates into somewhere in the 20s. But again, the price will be, and this will be in a revenue neutral way, we'd have to get rid of some of the tax expenditures. I believe one of the single biggest disasters would be if America defaulted on its debt. And we can't wait to the 11th and a half hour, the way they did on the government shutdown. If you spook the bond markets at this point, with the uncertainty that's going on in Europe right now, with the uncertainty that's going on in the Middle East, if it looked really like America was going to default, we could see double-digit interest rates. I don't care what your company is. You got 10 or 12% interest rates, your hiring's going to come to an end, your ability to expand is going to come to an end. What that would do to America's ability to kind of meet its current debt service would be a disaster. So to play politics with this issue is, in my mind, the height of irresponsibility.